And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I am the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and we're on the podcast again today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. My guest today is Ron Carucci. Say hi, Ron.
Peter, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And Ron, for those of you who don't know, is with a group called Navalent. He is an author. I think he's gone down that path 8 times now. He's a contributor at HBR and at Forbes, as well as a consultant. So Ron is deep in the space of thought leadership at the theoretical and, more importantly, at the applied. So let's just talk about your journey a little bit, Ron. Let's talk about what things that you've learned and share some of the battle scars. Tell me some of the things that you're doing now that are relatively new and are, more importantly, are working for you.
Yeah. So, it's funny. When I saw 3 years ago, about the time when you and I first chatted, I had my eighth book had come out. It had done very, very well. It got great reviews. It was Amazon #1. It was based on 10 years of research and a great study. And I thought, oh my gosh, the phone's going to ring off the wall. We're going to be able to leverage the book. It's going to bring in great business. It'll finally set us apart as a firm in some of the great work we can do at Leaders, and demonstrate the depth and heft of our substance and our insights of our collective 100 years of experience as a firm, and blah 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 blah. Well, of course, none of that happened. Got some phone calls. I wouldn't say the crickets were chirping, but it was not the avalanche of inbound folks clamoring to get access to my expertise that I thought it would be.
Got it. So let me sort of play that back. So the assumption was you have a quality product, right? This is 10 years worth of research. This isn't, random thoughts that you pulled out of your nose. I mean, this is serious stuff. This is stuff that's got gravitas and an academic bent, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it. And then it reaches pretty good levels, right? Amazon and sells fairly well, yet still, the floodgates don't open.
And for me, that was perplexing. It was depressing. It was discouraging. It was confusing. And I began to sort of, travel down the path of why. What something was wrong. And I needed to understand what that was. And eventually I realized that I really had no idea what to do. And so I set out about to find help. I actually hired a coach to sort of figure out what was wrong. And it was very good to subject myself to, a process of what it's like to be on the other side of me, getting diagnosed and assessed and getting a feedback report. And it was good for me to take my own medicine.
So for a consultant to be on the other side of the table, right, receiving services of a professional that's got your best interests at heart is not the typical seat that you're usually in, right?
And I would tell any person who's aspiring thought leader, get help. Oh my gosh, why I waited so long. It was the best decision I ever made. It was game changing on many levels, and helped me understand the many assumptions I had about the role thought leadership played in shaping a business were so flawed and misguided.
Well, tell me about those. So let's unpack that a little bit. So you came in, and again, this wasn't your first time at the rodeo. Your 8th book. So you've been doing this for some time. But which assumptions did you hold that were flawed?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, if you build it, they will come. Right. So the idea of having quality thoughts that are differentiating, that are important, that people should want to listen to, are itself the magnet that will attract the kinds of clients you want. And so, if you share it on LinkedIn, or you can get some exposure in the New York Times or magazine, good enough. It's all going to send people beating pathways to your door. The problem was, of course, that it was alongside about 27 million other people that those thoughts sat, whose claims are the same, whose language is the same, who boasts the same degree of impact, and use the same ways to describe their distinctions as we did. They didn't have the research or the heft, but so now, to the naked consumer who's got an untrained eye, who's choosing from among 20 million consultants and thought leaders, how do they pick? And so,
Well, and what you're saying is it's noisy, and the differentiation isn't there, because it's a fascinating time that we're living in. Is up until 10-ish years ago, information was scarce, right? So having access to information was the competitive advantage. Now we're all drowning in it. So the fact that you can put out a great quality book, the fact that you put the research in it, and then it goes out into the universe, it needs some filtering. It needs to stand out. It needs to differentiate from all the other noise that's out there. And it doesn't mean the other stuff that's out there is subpar, although it might. But separating yourself from a marketing standpoint is not easy to do.
and getting yourself caught in the head of, the comparison trap of, well, mine's better than that one. Why'd that one do so well? Or why they get, is just, you just get trapped in your.
Well, get over yourself, and life's not fair, right? that's the gist
And
there.
so you can get into a lot of discouragement, and your internal narratives can play tricks on you
Sure.
in ways that can also be paralyzing. So you got to get past all that material and that neurotic underbrush to get to the place where you understand why is it and what does it take to truly build a platform of influence beyond just having thoughts. And so, one of the findings in the first diagnosis my coach found was, she said, if your goal was to be the best kept secret, it's a marvelous job.
Yeah. I'm going to guess that wasn't the goal.
Right. And she said, what it took for me to find you, what it took for me to get to you was too difficult. She said, in my examination of your own networks, my examination of your web brand, my examination of who your thoughts are, you spend 90% of your time talking to people who already know you, and almost no time talking to people who don't know you. And I'm like, well, what does that mean?
So let me ask you this. So when your coach pointed that out, you could have had one of several reactions. Wow, holy cow, never thought of it that way. Or you could have called BS and said, no, that's absolutely not true. How did you respond to that?
I wasn't defensive. I mean, she had analytics, she had data to prove it. I didn't disagree with her. I didn't understand what she meant. I'm like, well, what's the difference? And she said, well, like, what your blog goes to, people who are in your echo chamber. Well, you need to broaden your reach. Why? She says, why your content deserves a much bigger platform. It's really good material. Why aren't you writing for Forbes or HBR or Fast Company?
Yep.
Why aren't you writing for other publications? And I'm like, well, that's an interesting idea. I'm sure if I call those people up and say, hey, I want to write for you, they're not going to take my call. She goes, no, but if I introduce you to all the editors, they will. Would you like that?
Sure.
And I'm like,
right.
Oh, that's how this works.
Well, and it's quite frankly, I mean, HBR is at a different sphere, but many of these, it's not as hard as you would think to get there. One of the observations that you just pointed out, and I see this all the time, is people put a lot of work, thought leaders put a lot of work and energy and effort and pride into the content that they put out, but then they put it out to this universe, which is very, 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 very small, of people that already know them and love them. So this is their own newsletter on their own blog. It's sort of behind the gate, right? And I think your coach was right in saying, wait a minute, how do you get this out to this broader universe of people that don't know who the heck you are, right? Because frankly, that's a more important group for your business. So it doesn't mean you don't nurture those that are already doing business with you, that are part of your networks and all that. But if that is the largest allocation of resources, be those time or money or energy or whatever, your growth rate as a business is going to be really small, right? Because you're preaching to the choir, if you will.
Exactly. So the next thing I know, I'm signing a contract to write for Forbes and signing a contract to write for HBR. And now I, have written probably over 100 articles for both since, and then the next altitude was redefining a peer set, right? So how do you get yourself associated with peers you want to be associated with? And so,
So so we never outgrow sort of middle school. We always want to go to the cool parties, right? It just definition of cool changes as we age and move into thought leadership, right?
And for me, that was a perplexing question because she said, "Well, whose work do you admire? Who's shaped your career? Who's really shaped who you want to be?" And I'm like, most people who write what I write are hacks. So I'm not sure. She was like, "No, seriously." So I gave her 7 or 8 names of really well distinguished. I didn't know what she was going to ask me to do. So I said, here's the people whose material I really find substantive and brilliant. And she said, great, I want you to call them all up and interview them. I said, what?
Right.
She said, call them all up and interview them as part of your, and I said, they're not going to take my call. Like one of them was Daniel Kahneman. She said, or John Haidt. I said, they're not going
Right,
to
right.
call them all up or write them. And sure enough, I wrote them all. They all said yes. I had phenomenal interviews with them.
Wait, every one of them said yes. So you were able to reach out cold to Daniel Kahneman, who's a legend, and let alone a Nobel Prize winner, but truly someone that has changed the game. And the answer to that was, sure, I'll do an interview.
Absolutely. And he even when we got on the interview, of course, I'm like a little boy quivering, talking to one of my heroes, right? He's saying, he said, I usually say no to these, but something about you made me want to talk to you. I'm like, well, great. And it was a phenomenal interview. It had great coverage on Forbes.
Right.
John Haidt is now, I'm now on John's advisory board at NYU. So it led me to a group of new colleagues and friends and clients.
So let me ask you something, Ron, because
CEOs that I interviewed became clients.
Right.
So the broadening of my peer set and a set of relationships, in a way, it would have no more occurred to me to do than becoming the man on the moon, became a great mechanism in my relationships.
So let me ask you something, because one observation that I make in the work that we do here with authors and speakers and thought leaders is a lot of folks are introverts, even keynoters, where you think if you're the way you make a living is to get on stage and do your thing for an hour, that's almost the textbook definition of an extrovert, but it's not actually true. And that outreach and that asking for help and that asking to connect and then networking and sort of all that stuff is not natural for a lot of folks. And it's, even if it's natural, it's so outside of the realm of things that they think they should be doing, could be doing, et cetera. Does that resonate with your world?
So you look at my Myers-Briggs scores, I'm a high.
Okay.
In fact, I had a great interview with Susan Cain about that.
Right.
And she actually really helped me. She finally made me realize that, closeted introverts have to stop pretending to be extroverts. Right. And so my article is, here's why we can all stop pretending to be extroverts now. And so, yeah, it does take more energy for us. It does take more work for us. But it doesn't get you off the hook from doing it. You have to prepare yourself differently. Conserve your energy differently. Don't show up at a networking party too soon because you won't make it through the whole night. Have to preserve.
Right.
The reality is, relationships are a key part of this. Connection is a real part of this. Thought leadership doesn't live in a vacuum. Your brilliant ideas aren't going to help anybody if they don't get to the people they have to help. And so you've got to put yourself in a pathway of not just new peers, but new people you can help. There's nothing, and I write about this in my article called "The Challenges of Being a Thought Leader Are Different Than You Think," because I discovered this for myself. None of this is natural. There's nothing normal about any of this to do it. I'm not sure that.
Well, but it's hard work. It's strategy. It's putting the effort in. It's getting outside of your comfort zone. It's all these things. One of the things that's interesting from what you say is, you thought that the development of the thought leadership that was real thought leadership, not, motivational quotes or whatever, but 10-year studies and well-written books and all that other sort of things was enough, because most people can't do that, right? And then you have to layer on the marketing. We do a lot of work in what we call thought leadership marketing, which is using the content, using the essence of the work as the way to attract people into your world, right? So number one, where are those people? How do they prefer to consume content? Because we have a lot of different options today in terms of how we serve it up, whether audio, video, podcast, long form article, infographics, whatever, getting it out to them and using that content as the hook to get them in to have a deeper conversation around the services that you provide and what you can do to help them. So have you, now that you've sort of become aware of this, tell me how you've developed those muscles sort of organizationally and how it plays out in your business on an ongoing basis. Is it, launch a book, go do all the stuff and then go back to baseline? Or tell me what the difference in your organization is today versus maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago when you weren't fluent in this.
So we had to work at that, right? So we had to have a marketing firm come in and build out optimize our SEO, install Lead Feeder, install MailChimp, install HubSpot, install all the technologies that allow us to understand who's coming to consume our content, build our subscription list, build intimacy and build the audience and curate content for them. And, we did this year, we did a great virtual summit, with Grunch. Mm-hmm. So it's broadening the platform for your organization as much as you're broadening while boarding your own platform. And then you've got to be the disciplines that it takes to keep curating new content. Keep doing all the mechanics and technology that extend your reach in the platform, and understanding that every time Google changes the algorithm, you gotta adapt with it. Understanding that curating content for a list is interesting, but if you're not actually engaged in ongoing conversations that get those conversations from online to offline, you don't get to build clients. It's curating content that your audience wants to hear, right? So now I've got a wonderful new client who read an article of mine in HBR about a problem he had just been solving. He had just been promoted to a brand new executive, clicked at the bottom of that article and bought Rising to Power because he was a brand new executive, read the book that weekend, and called me on Monday.
So, and that, by the way, that's the whole point, right? So the point of this is not, so Ron can now be a marketer and put that on his resume. The point of all this is finding net new clients. Without this sort of thought leadership approach, do you believe that that person would have ever found you?
No, absolutely not. There's no way they would have known who I was. Now, is it, we have a debate in my firm all the time about, is it sales or is it marketing? Is it about your network and working your relationships, or is it about reaching new audiences? Well, it's both.
Yeah, of course.
Right? I mean, it's all about relationship formation, regardless of how they enter your funnel or how well you know them. But the reality is, if you want to build a sustainable business where you can continue to grow and add new clients to your roster and add new relationships, they have to be able to find you. I was attracting all the sociopaths. Yep. I was attracting the clients who made my eyes roll when I saw them in my caller ID. I wasn't attracting the clients I was passionate about wanting to help and partner with.
Okay, but let's touch on that though. So oftentimes what happens is somebody finds your work, but it's not the somebody you want, right? So I would imagine you have a profile of your target clients, the ones that you can serve the most, the ones that are most profitable, the ones that you have the most fun working with, et cetera. And that's your ideal sort of avatar, if you will. But then you get, whatever, the unemployed or you said you're a magnet for the sociopaths and all that. So when that happens, you have to evaluate and say, wait, A, is it me? Right? But more likely, where is my content going to attract these sort of people? And how am I more deliberate about where I put it to get more of the types I'd like to attract?
And so that's about strategy, right? So, one of the things that I started doing with my coach early on, and we now do regularly, which was, so when we began the work, it was about attracting higher quality clients. She said, tell me stories of two of them. Tell me the stories of two leaders that if you could have 10 more of them in your life, that's who you'd want to work with. So I began to tell her detailed stories of these two engagements that were thrilling, and we done our best work, and we made a big difference, and they went on for multiple years. And she's taking feverish notes. Being good consultant, she's taking good notes. That's great. That's what she should do. After about 15 minutes, she turns her computer around. She goes, great. Here's your editorial calendar for the next year. And I said, what? She had been curating the stories and problems I had solved and turning them into an editorial calendar. So as an example, one leader I'd worked with, a CEO of a major corporation in one part of the country, went to be CEO of a corporation in another part of the country with a dramatically different culture, a dramatically different set of business problems, and a dramatically different set of leaders around him. He was really unprepared for that. He was surrounded by a team of leaders who had a very different value set than he did. And he was a very principled man. One of the titles she put in the editorial calendar was "How to Lead a Team That Doesn't Share Your Values."
So she's creating basically the narrative or the editorial calendar based on the pain points or the things that were common in the client that you loved working with to attract others that would be of the same ilk or in the same pain or be similar sort of engagement for you.
Principle 101 was, and this, it's like a big duh when you say it, but if you want to work with those kinds of clients, you have to solve the problems and talk about the kinds of issues that are important to them so that they can find you. And so, the idea of shaping content and shaping what I wanted to talk about around the kinds of people and telling the kinds of stories and using the kinds of data that I know the people I want to work with are interested in became critical as I set off on writing those 100 plus articles for Forbes.
Yep.
I had to have a direction. I couldn't just they both Forbes and HBR have themes and focus areas.
Sure.
And those can be instructive to me, but shaping the narrative around the kinds of things people I want to work with are interested in talking about became critical.
So prior to that, Ron, what were the guardrails that you were using when it came to putting content out there, if there were any? So how did you decide I'm going to write an article on X versus Y prior to realizing the client base?
How kind of you to assume there weren't any guardrails.
Okay.
Who knows? That would be the answer. It was I think,
Okay. So just,
or sometimes it was the worst mistake consulting firms make, which is we talk about our offerings. We write articles about
because everybody wants to hear about that, right?
talk about a snooze fest, right? And so,
well, so I think the counterintuitive piece here, though, Ron, is that the creative process can actually be enhanced by having constraints put on it, right? So the constraint that your coach gave you in a good way was writing to attract the people that you want to work with. So now you've got some sort of a box to stay in, or lines to color within. Doesn't mean you can't be creative. You can be incredibly creative within those set of parameters to be relevant to a certain population that you can provide value to, which makes the creativity probably a bit easier, and if nothing else, definitely more effective.
Well, but you have yes, and you have to be disciplined to do it, right? You have to be consistent in curating content and material, and pay attention to what's trending out there. Pay attention to what it is people are consuming. You don't want to be in that conversation. And should I be in that conversation? Have I earned my right to be in that conversation? Is it going to pass next week, and then there's no point in me?
Well, and even the conversations you choose to be in have to be aligned with your brand. So there might be several things that you're intrigued by, you're interested in, or you could throw your 2 cents in, but doesn't make sense in terms of the keeping the signal separated from the noise in what you put out into the world. Doesn't mean you always have to be talking about the same thing over and over, but there's certain things that are probably outside of the realm of what one would expect to hear from you. So let me ask you this. We've covered a lot of stuff here, Ron, and it's been great. We got a couple of minutes here. It feels like I'm talking to the converted, right? So there was old Ron 3 or 4 years ago, connects with a coach, has a whole different perspective as to how you're using thought leadership in a more efficient way to grow your business. What would you tell folks out there? What would you tell you 3 or 4 or 5 years ago? There's someone exactly in the place that you are then, right now. What would you tell them to do more of and to do less of?
Well, it's a great question. So there's 2 camps of me. There's the I believe I just don't know what to do. And there's people don't find, clients don't find us that way. So to the latter group, because I have a few of those in my firm, I would say executives absolutely do make decisions about who serves them online.
Yep, 100%.
No, your website should not have a $1.5 million transformation. Click add to cart.
Yeah, probably not. Right.
Part of the decision pathway of that executive includes work online. They don't just send out their team to go find people for them. They actually do some of the work themselves. If you are not somewhere in that decision pathway, you can be sure you won't get picked. So you've got to be in that decision pathway somewhere. So you absolutely have to be accessible and visible, because there are, for whatever it is you think you're doing that only you're doing, there are thousands of other people who are also only doing it. You have to be a different world now. To those who would say, okay, well, where do I start? That can be a maddening question, because there's technology aspects of it, there's content creation parts of it, there's the what platform, what voice, to whom, is it worth it to even start? Is it worth it to even start now? I'm so late to the party. I had that lament a year or two with my coach, and she said, we're all late to the party. We all should have been on LinkedIn in 1998. We all should have been on Twitter in 2003. We're all late to the party. It's not social media, digital content. It's not going away. It's getting more crowded, but you ought to get out there and start somewhere, whether it's a blog or a podcast or digital content or online courses or some way to codify your ideas, to set yourself apart, to demonstrate that your ideas are worth following. You've got to get out there, and you have to be diligent, consistent, and assume it's a minimum of a 3-year journey just to get to a place where you get to the starting line. Right? It's a 2 to 3.
No, I love it. Yeah, this is not a get rich quick business by any stretch. The one thing I didn't hear there, Ron, and I wanted to ask this. So, it's never too late to get to the party in terms of social media and getting the content out there, et cetera. However, one thing that I see too often, and I'd love to get your 2 cents on this, is people start with one thing and sort of go nuts with it, right? So they get obsessive with Twitter or YouTube or whatever, and they're operating without a strategy. And to me, I'm old school. Everything starts with strategy, and then everything else is just a tactic that either supports that strategy or doesn't. And when people don't have that filter there, they do a lot of stuff that's in the doesn't category unknowingly.
It's very easy to, as a naked eye, to sort of assume all channels are created equal, and then you want to just fill them all with junk. The reality is, yes, there has to be a strategy in place. I don't know that debating whether or not you should do a podcast or a blog endlessly makes a lot of sense. There may be in your first year you have to do some experimentation to find out what works for your audience and what grows your audience faster. There's an enormous technology component to this that I would say get the experts. Do not try and figure out HubSpot on your own. Do not try and figure out Leadfeeder or MailChimp or landing pages or any of those things on your own. There are people out there who understand how they work in combination with each other, how they work with your website, how to optimize your SEO. Get experts to do that for you.
Because the thing that you can't outsource is the thought leadership. Most everything else you can get support and help with in terms of SEO or HubSpot or any of those tools. You need to have a cursory understanding of what it claims to do, but you don't have to be the guru inside of your organization that knows that. So this has been great, Ron. How can people find you? Obviously, I want to make sure people can get in touch with you.
Yes. So come visit us at www.navalent.com. We have a free ebook for you called Leading Transformation Organizations at navalent.com/transformation. We have a great quarterly magazine we started publishing 3 years ago as part of building our platform called the Navalent Quarterly, which has all kinds of great articles and research on organizations and teams and leadership. And a great example of how to start your own thought leadership. If you want to see a great example, it's worked great for us. You can also find me on Twitter at Ron Carucci and on LinkedIn as well. So happy to chat. I have a great article on LinkedIn called The Challenges of Thought Leadership Are Different Than You Think. If you want to read about my painful, agonizing journey and what I learned along the way. To share the pain and help you avoid some of my missteps.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for joining. There's a lot of stuff in here today, a lot of good stuff from someone that's been there, done that, and is on the other side of that journey, reaping some of the benefits, yet still fighting the good fight every day. So thank you for being honest and being transparent and sharing some pearls of wisdom with us today, Ron. I appreciate it very much.
Peter, a pleasure being with you. Thanks for having me.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.